A powerful moment unfolded in the courtroom when a black judge confronted a racist officer whose actions had sparked outrage. Tensions were already high, but no one could have predicted what happened next. As the officer stood there, trying to defend his actions, the judge delivered a response that left him speechless. The courtroom, filled with anticipation, watched in stunned silence as the judge's words hit harder than any gavel could. What followed was an unexpected turn that would challenge the officer's beliefs and test the very system he served. In a place where justice is supposed to prevail, could this confrontation truly change anything? Or would it only highlight the deep-rooted issues that still need to be addressed? Stay with us as we uncover what happens when power, racism, and justice collide in the most dramatic way. The officer in question, Officer Carter, had a history that many in the community were all too familiar with. His record, though officially spotless, was marred by allegations of racial profiling and misconduct. Over the years, he had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with the system. Yet despite numerous complaints, he had always managed to escape serious consequences. But today was different. Judge Daniels, the first black judge to ever serve in this county, had built a reputation for fairness and unwavering commitment to justice, even when it meant standing up to the powerful. She had seen firsthand the damage done by people like Officer Carter, and her courtroom was where the community's trust would either be restored or shattered. As the tension simmered, it was clear that this case was about much more than a single officer's actions. It was about the very soul of justice. As the trial went on, the room seemed to grow heavier with every passing minute. Officer Carter, sitting in the defendant's chair, shifted uneasily under the weight of Judge Daniels' unyielding gaze. His arrogance, once a shield that protected him from accountability, now appeared fragile. Around him, the witnesses spoke of a pattern. Civilians wrongfully targeted, their rights trampled by someone who was supposed to protect them. But Carter denied it all, his responses defensive and rehearsed, as if he'd been through this before. The more he spoke, the more the cracks in his story became apparent. Judge Daniels, however, didn't react immediately. She listened closely, her eyes focused on Carter, but there was something in her silence that was even more intimidating than words. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, a growing group of activists was rallying for justice, determined to bring light to the officer's actions. They had long since lost faith in the system, but Judge Daniels represented a small flicker of hope. Yet the whispers in the crowd weren't just about Officer Carter. There were murmurs about the judge herself. Was she truly capable of standing up to the pressure? Some doubted her ability to make a difference, trapped in their skepticism about a system that often protected its own. Back inside, things took a turn when a key piece of evidence suddenly went missing. Evidence that could potentially seal Carter's fate. The room erupted into chaos, and for a moment, it seemed as though everything was slipping out of control. Was someone trying to sabotage the trial? And if so, who would stand to gain from it? The stakes had never been higher, and the truth seemed farther away than ever. Judge Daniels knew this wasn't just a test of law, but of courage and resilience, and she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The disappearance of the crucial evidence had sent shockwaves through the courtroom. The judge's face remained unreadable, but everyone could sense the gravity of the situation. The defense team quickly seized on the opportunity, arguing that the missing evidence was enough to dismiss the case altogether. They made their case with confidence, suggesting that the entire trial was flawed from the beginning. The air was thick with uncertainty as Judge Daniels called for a brief recess, stepping out of the courtroom to gather her thoughts. Outside, the activist group had grown restless. Word had spread about the missing evidence, and whispers of a conspiracy began to circulate. Some claimed the officer had powerful allies behind the scenes, pulling strings to ensure his escape. Others believed this was just another example of the justice system failing, like so many times before. A few even speculated that Judge Daniels was being pressured to drop the case, or worse, that she might be forced into a compromise. As the recess ended, the courtroom was tense. Judge Daniels returned to her seat with a firm resolve, but it was clear that she had been thinking about the larger forces at play. Carter's smug demeanor had returned, as if he knew he had already won, but the judge wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily. She called for the prosecution to present their backup evidence, the things that hadn't yet been shared with the public. As the evidence was unveiled, it was clear that there was more than what had initially been shown. Hidden in the piles of documents and recordings were new witnesses, new facts that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. But even as the weight of this new evidence began to sink in, the feeling of dread lingered. Someone had orchestrated this chaos. Someone was desperate to bury the truth. As Judge Daniels looked at Officer Carter, she could see the fear behind his eyes. But it wasn't just his fate on the line now. It was hers, too. If she pushed too hard, what would happen to her career? To her reputation? The system was watching, and the tension in the room grew unbearable. The final moments of the trial were closing in, but no one knew where it would lead. Would justice prevail, or was this another example of a system rigged? As his words hung in the air, the room felt like it was closing in. The stakes had been raised to an unimaginable level. With a simple confession, Captain Rhodes had not only cast doubt on everything that had happened in the trial, but had also revealed a shadowy world that many had suspected, but no one had dared to expose. And now Judge Daniels was forced to confront the truth in all its ugly reality. What had started as a battle for justice was quickly morphing into a war for survival. The final moments of the trial were quickly approaching, and the question was no longer just about one officer's guilt or innocence. It was about whether anyone could truly escape the grip of a corrupt system. The courtroom was in chaos, as everyone tried to process what Captain Rhodes had just revealed. Officer Carter, for the first time in the entire trial, looked genuinely terrified. His usual smugness had vanished, replaced by a palpable fear that he couldn't hide. The defense team scrambled to figure out how to spin this confession in their favor, but even they seemed lost. As the tension reached its peak, the answer seemed uncertain. But one thing was clear, the story wasn't over yet. Judge Daniels stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the decision bearing down on her. She knew the risk of exposing the entire corruption network could cost her career or worse. But as she glanced at the faces of the witnesses and the activists outside, she knew what had to be done. With a steady hand, she slammed the gavel down. "This court will not remain silent," she declared, her voice cutting through the tension. "I will not protect those who betray the trust of the people." In the days that followed, the investigation exploded into the public eye, leading to the arrest of several high-ranking officials, including her mentor. Officer Carter and Captain Rhodes were both charged, and the justice system began to rebuild. Though the road ahead would be long and difficult, Judge Daniels had made a stand, one that sent a powerful message. No matter how deep the corruption, truth and accountability would always prevail.